Welcome back to the Hunt Harvest Health Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Hilary Lampers. Today we are going to be doing part 2 of our 5-part GI health series. The first part, you can go back and listen to part 1, which gives you some statistics, some information about current U.S. rates of GI diseases and food allergies. We talk about some anatomy and physiology. We also talk about some of the state of health of our food system in the United States, and I do a bunch of rants on there, so you can go listen to that one. That's going to be the longest one of the series. A lot of information to cover, especially when you're getting data related to so many vast things that are influencing our GI health. Again, there's so much that we could talk about with GI health, but I really want to kind of keep it useful information for you and something that you can possibly use in your own life to improve your GI health today. Now, over the next 4 days, I'm going to be breaking it up into different parts related to a protocol that we have on our website called the Gut Restoration Program. The Gut Restoration Program has been downloaded by thousands of people. I've used it in my practice on multiple hundreds, if not thousands of people. I don't know, so many people that have had great results by just changing their diet, possibly using some supplements to support it, and making long-standing better changes to your GI health. Now, of course, our sponsor for today's podcast is Stealthy Nutrition. This is mine and Ryan's nutritional company, and we provide a gut restoration bundle which goes along with the gut restoration program. You can go to stealthynutrition.com, search gut restoration, and you should see the bundle there that includes all the supplements that you'll need for this program, including the program itself, which has a chart on how to take these supplements. Of course, I am not a doctor, and I always have to make a disclaimer that I'm not telling you what to do. You're downloading at your own risk. But it's a great thing that people can go and get that and start making changes today to improve your overall gut health. Now, because Stealthy Nutrition is sponsoring this, let's talk just a little bit about one of the products in this bundle. In this bundle is a product called GI Restore. Now, GI Restore is a very comprehensive formula that contains a number of different herbals and nutrients, as well as amino acids that are going to help heal the gut lining. This is a big problem that we have, is that a lot of people have inflammation and they have leaky gut, and basically their GI lining and their epithelial tissues have been compromised. And so what we want to do, we don't want to just remove food allergens. We don't want to just give something like a probiotic, which is really meant for the colon. We don't want to just give digestive support or liver support. We want to actually heal that lining, and that's what this product does. So if you go to Stealthy Nutrition and read more about GI Restore, you'll see nutrients in there like L-glutamine, MSM and quercetin is in that, N-acetylglucosamine, DGL, aloe vera, slippery elm, marshmallow. These are all demulcents that help to coat and heal the lining of the entire GI tract, which is really cool. And then there's some things also to help move stuff through, like prune powder and citrus pectin. But this is supporting your immune system as well as your digestive tract. And we recommend that if you're going to do the gut restoration program, you follow the instructions there. It's best taken without food because it can move through the GI tract and coat it without the interference of food moving through the colon. But again, go to stealthynutrition.com, use the code STEALTHY for 10% off your first and all future orders if you want to try the gut restoration bundle, or if you just need the GI Restore by itself, a great product to start helping to heal the lining of your GI tract from your mouth all the way to the end. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what the 4R gut protocol is. Now, this is a strategic approach to improving gut health through 4 key steps. You remove, you replace, you repair, and then you rebalance. And today we're really going to focus on the first step, which is remove. Now, the remove phase of the 4R's gut protocol involves identifying and eliminating any potential triggers or factors that may be contributing to your gut dysfunction. And so this includes removing harmful foods, toxins, and infections that might be disrupting the gut bacteria. So to go over that a little bit, let's think about food. That's very obvious. We talked a lot about that yesterday on part 1. We talked about food allergies and how food can affect our GI tract. So the diet or the plan that I put together, this 4 hours program, and honestly, you can go online and find this everywhere. This is a traditional naturopathic GI plan that has been used for decades. I mean, my mentors were using this. This is who I learned from over 20 years ago. So, if you don't want to use my program or my supplements, there's lots of information out there to help support you with this. So the first thing is removing food allergens, and the program will basically remove all the big food allergens from the program. Now, the other one is toxins, and I think the biggest things that I would put in there that people are taking that are toxins are alcohol is probably the biggest toxin. So that is definitely not on your foods list. Would be alcohol. You might want to consider any medications that you're taking, like NSAIDs, anti-inflammatories, chronic Tylenol, anything that's going to be hard on the liver. Obviously, if you're on opioids or any drugs that need to be weaned off of, you don't want to stop those cold turkey. And if you decide you want to decrease any toxins, you might need to prepare for that before you ever consider doing removing them for the program. And then infections. We always want to think when a person's having GI tract, could there be any infection that could be going on? And we'll talk a little bit about that when it comes to testing the GI tract. There are some foods that are considered allergens, like eggs, citrus, etc., but only some people have reactions to those. Now, if you don't know what you're having a reaction to, it's best just to cut out all allergens. So that would be gluten, dairy, soy, corn, cane sugar, eggs, citrus, maybe all fruit, including strawberries, and shellfish. Also, you probably want to remove any tree nuts like peanuts, etc. But I've got a list of those in the program if you want to go through those, but those are the big allergens that we consider removing. Now, if you're considering doing an animal-based detox or diet using this for basically removing everything except animal-based diets, that gets a little bit more complicated only because you will be removing all fruits and vegetables. Some people are irritated by excess fiber, oxalates, and other things in fruits and vegetables. So this is why you would consider an animal-based diet. But making sure that you're getting lots of good, healthy fats. But we'll talk more about that later. That's much more specific. And then besides just removing the dietary things, we want to involve looking at possibly testing if we're concerned that there's anything going on that could be causing kind of bigger problems that the 4 R's is not going to address fully. So that would be something like SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Candida overgrowth is another one. If you are concerned about parasites, you might want to test as well. But really, removing is just what it sounds like. It's very obvious. We're going to be removing anything that is an obstacle that could be irritating the gut lining. Now, like we talked about yesterday with food allergies, is there can be what's called a delayed response with food allergies. So maybe you eat a food and you don't get an immediate response. This is called an IgE response, and this is what most physicians are looking for when they're looking for a true allergen. And the IgE response would be like immediate swelling of the throat, immediate hives, immediate respiratory distress, maybe immediate abdominal pain, immediate diarrhea, something like that. But most food allergies are delayed, and that's created by what's called an IgG antibody. And so a delayed reaction can go upwards of 72 hours after you eat a food. The other thing to think about too with antibodies and the immune system, it's so intricate how it works, is that if I were to eat a food today, my body would begin creating antibodies to support either, recognizing that food. It would take, especially allergenic foods, they tend to create these antibodies. it would take at least 21 days for my body to clear those antibodies. So this means I can't just stop eating gluten today and then a week from now say, oh, it didn't work, I'm going to go back to eating gluten. That's not how it works. You've got to wait at least 3 weeks to know that that antibody is completely out of your system. So when you're doing any program like this, you have to be doing it for at least 3 weeks, preferably 4 to 6 weeks to remove all these allergens. The other thing to think about is we don't necessarily always understand which foods are giving us the problem. And most Americans are only eating about 10 foods. We really don't have a very high complexity diet, and we're eating the same foods every single day. So if you never eat gluten, well, then that's not going to be an issue for you if you're removing it. But if you're still having immune problems or GI problems and you haven't been eating gluten and you're eating all the other allergens, of course, you've got to cut all those things out. A little bit about testing is there's a few different ways to test. One is an actual stool test. Now, I use a couple different companies. I use GI Effects from Genova. You can use the GI Map. You can these are all stool tests, and they look at a number of different factors related to the health of the gut. They look at digestive and absorption capacity. They look at inflammatory and possibly autoimmune reactions in the gut. They're looking for certain biomarkers. It actually looks at your microbiome and the prevalence, abundance of your specific microbiome. You can test for things like H. pylori, candida, zonulin, which is something that helps to keep your tight junctions in your GI tract tight. So can play into the diagnosis, etc., of leaky gut. You can also see if there's blood in the stool, as well as parasites, possibly pathogenic bacteria that's normal to have and healthy to have. And then what am I missing? Oh, and I think I mentioned it, immune markers. So there is an antibody called IgA. IgA is an antibody that's in the GI tract made by the endothelial cells. And if we see really high IgA in the stool, we can pretty much almost guess you've got a food allergy. Okay? So antibodies, and remember the immune system is big in the gut. And so these all play in together. Another thing you can test, like I said before, you can test for SIBO, which is actually a breath test. It's testing for methane and or hydrogen gases to tell you which type of SIBO you have. SIBO is basically where the bacteria in your colon have kind of gone up into your small intestine and they're living where they're not supposed to live. Now, interestingly enough, SIBOs become really common. Treatments are actually quite hard to do. If you're going to use the antibiotics, it can be thousands of dollars, but I see it a lot in white, stressed out type A women. I've never tested for it. I don't think I have it, but I see it a lot in that population. So stress plays huge into SIBO and that kind of thing. Besides the stool testing, and the SIBO testing, you can also do food allergy testing. Now, this gets a little bit controversial, and sometimes I don't even like to run it because, again, back to that person who hasn't been eating gluten forever, your gluten proteins are maybe not going to come up high on your test, right? So we wouldn't know if you had a true allergy to it because you're not eating it. Now, there are some foods that come up every time. Like, I never eat hazelnuts, and hazelnuts are a +4. Well, maybe I should stay away from hazelnuts. But because of our dietary, sometimes restrictions and things we've cut out, I really try to tell people you kind of need to eat these foods that are on here to see if your body is having an immune reaction. And if somebody's got, obviously, if they've got celiac disease, we're not going to do that, right? But a lot of people don't want to go back on dairy. They don't want to go on that. So that can be difficult. There's some tests we do in our office that are a little bit more on the fringe of, food allergy testing. But I've found that they look at the blood and they look at the digestive capacity of your body to handle these foods. And I get way better data from that. And that will show big food allergens like potato, dairy, egg, fruit, soy, cane sugar, grains, etc. So there's some very interesting tests out there with food allergies, but sometimes I'm like, it's just best to do a program like this than to possibly spend the money. Maybe spend the money if you don't get any success with doing a 6-week gut restoration program, etc., or food elimination diet. All right, so that's pretty much it with remove. I mean, this is very obvious. Removing these things helps to obviously stop invaders that are causing problems in the GI tract. It gives the GI tract a rest from these invaders. A lot of the foods that we eat are ultra processed and they're coming in and causing all kinds of problems. So sometimes just doing one of these programs and giving your gut a rest from those types of foods is very beneficial. And lastly, I find that people start eating healthier when they do this because they feel so much better. I just got a text today from a patient, migraine headaches, chronic migraine headaches for years. She's very active, etc. We put her on the program and she sent me a message today. She said she's literally almost having no headaches. She's lost some weight. She feels amazing. But now what does she do? Does she introduce foods? What does she do? And so that becomes a challenge, right? When somebody's feeling really good, they don't want to go back to feeling like crap. So the questions that we ask is like, what did you remove that you don't want to add back in? And then what did you remove that you want to add back in? And we'll talk more about that when we get to the end of this series of how to restore and add foods back in. But sometimes people just learn to eat healthier when they do this. So because their symptoms go down and they start really just eating whole food. A little bit on the animal-based stuff with the GI tract. Now, I wanted to touch a little bit on parasites. I'm not going to go heavily in this series into parasites, but I did want to touch on it because I think a lot of Americans think that we live in such an ultra clean environment that parasites don't exist. But I would say that is completely false. Parasites are smart and they live within lots of humans. I mean, we've probably got parasites that help us feel better, you know, like there's so much going on in our GI tract, in our immune system, but parasites in general can also be a huge problem relating and causing GI problems. The prevalence of parasites in the United States is, you know, obviously less than developing countries, but they do affect millions of people annually. And some of the top parasites are toxoplasmosis, trichomonasis, toxocariasis, cysticercosis, and Chagas disease. Really, a lot of these we're going to see with things like sexually transmitted diseases, cleaning cat boxes, water sources, exposure to people that have traveled or come from other parts of the world where parasites are really high. So parasites can be transferred, but a lot of these kind of come from that. And we do obviously see lower socioeconomic people tend to have more problems with this because they have sometimes limited healthcare access and sanitation, which is something that all of us who have toilets that flush and running water, we can take that for granted for sure. Geographic disparities play into this as well. And like there was a study done in 2019 that found that 38% of children in the Black Mississippi Delta, so it's predominantly Black African Americans in Mississippi Delta, they had intestinal parasite infections. So I think too, where you live, what your socioeconomic status is, and how your access to healthcare is, as well as what is your food and what are you eating, etc. Now, childhood parasites are kind of common worldwide, and we've probably all had them at some point in our life, and they're usually related to hygiene and sanitation issues as well. You know, like playing in the sandbox or the dirt, you know, putting objects in their mouths, etc. These things get spread easily. But I've been surprised how many adults I've seen these in too. And they were having longstanding GI symptoms or even mental health symptoms, ADHD, irritability, sleep disorder. And we did a GI stool test on them and found out that they had like pinworms. Um, Giardia is another one. This is very common in our society, our community here. Ryan has had it 2 or 3 times in the last couple years because he is out living in the wilds and has made a mistake of drinking water that he shouldn't. But one time he didn't even know where he got it. He cleared his water and he got it. So, you know, things like pinworms, Giardia, hookworms are another one that can happen. Cryptosporidius, scabies is actually one, ringworm is one. And so again, there can be prevention of these, but a lot of these can cause some GI disturbance. And whenever we've got people coming in with GI problems, we want to take a really good history and figure out, could there be any way that they could have like pinworms? Do they have young children who have pinworms? Because these things are contagious. And we could have that, you know, do they have pets in the home? Do they have contaminated soil or water in their environment? Is there proper food handling going on? And do they have environmental sanitation? So parasites, and there's entire like businesses built out of helping people get rid of parasites. I have seen patients of mine with very high socioeconomic standards. I mean, they are not living in the ghetto. They are literally living in $2 million homes, etc. They've traveled. But sometimes it's because they've traveled. They've been around the world. They've been to these places. And so they are affected by these as well. So we want to take these into consideration. And the other thing that I would like to say is that parasites sometimes thrive in an immunocompromised situation, meaning the prevalence of autoimmune disease that we have in our culture right now and the medication of these diseases by biologics and immunosuppressant drugs, these can lower your immunity. And your immune system is actually, well, really it's your stomach acid is number one. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow. But stomach acid is so important and that pH staying low because it kills viruses, bacteria, and parasites, right? But if you've got poor digestive fire and poor, stomach acid, which happens naturally as we get older, that could be a problem. And then you've got a suppressed immune system from these hardcore drugs that you're put on to suppress your autoimmune condition symptoms. Sometimes the immune system is just checked out and it's not paying attention to parasites coming into the system. And so the GI issues, etc., can come on. And so I would always test. And testing can be tricky. I've tested people for parasites and they had parasites because they were eliminating parasites and the test came back negative, which is really interesting. So parasites are smart. They can be tricky. You got to catch them on their life cycle. But we can't always rule that out anymore like I think we used to. But now we're seeing like, no, especially with people traveling around the world. And you guys out there, don't eat predator meat that's not cooked. Duh. Right? All right. So that's all that I have today for part 2 of this GI Health series, the 4 R's program. Tomorrow we'll come back and we're going to get deeper into the weeds about digestion, absorption, what's going on, and what could be an issue for you if you notice that you're having lots of food allergies, etc. All right, again, you can go to stealthynutrition.com. You can check out any of our supplements. Maybe consider after this podcast now starting the gut restoration program after the first of the year. Would love to have you use that code STEALTHY for a discount. And okay, we'll see you tomorrow. Because I am a doctor, and I'm probably not your doctor, this is just a disclaimer. So anything here at Stealthy Hunter, Hunt Harvest Health, or Stealthy Nutrition is not used to prescribe, treat, or diagnose. And any of this information that you take from this podcast, from our website, or any other source related to Stealthy Hunter is for informational purposes only, and you use at your own risk.